Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. We will begin the webinar in 1 minute. Hi, everyone. Thank you once again. My name is Andrew Moses, Head of Canadian Operations for Freshdesk. Just wanted to start off with a couple of quick announcements. This webinar should take anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes, and we will follow it up with some questions. And if you have any questions, feel free to add your questions in the questions section, and I'll be monitoring it through the course of this webinar. This webinar will also be recorded and will be available in our website, and we will share the link with you. If you have to maybe drop off at the end, you will have that all recorded. To give you a quick intro about this webinar, we wanted to tackle a topic which was kind of trending in the IT industry, and we decided service catalog is probably the best topic. And then when we looked around, who would be the best person to talk about service catalog? There you go. We found George Spalding, the executive VP at Pink Elephant. He's mastered ITIL, so we thought he's probably the best person to share his insights about service catalog. So without further ado, I'll let George take you through this webinar and enthrall you. Thanks. Over to you, George.
Enthrall? I'm supposed to enthrall them? Okay. All right. Be sure you're on mute there. Oh, good. That's great. Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. This is George Spalding. I'm the Executive VP at Pink. So my experience with ITIL, of course, is extensive. I've been doing it for roughly 15 years, and I was one of the co-authors of the ITIL v3 Continual Service Improvement Volume, which has since been modified by others. I've been talking about Service Catalog almost for that entire 15 years. It's changed. The conversation has changed over that time. So the first real discussion we have to have when you talk about a service catalog is what is it, and why would I want one, and what is a service? Those are some questions we're going to need to answer. So we're going to need to answer really the biggest one, which is what is a service, and we're going to do that first. So in our discussion here, we're talking about IT. So, but even though I've titled the slide here, what is an IT service, there's no other IT anywhere in the slide. So a service is a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating outcomes that the customers want to achieve without ownership of costs and risks. So the customer doesn't want to know what goes into the service. It doesn't really want to know all the individual elements or parts or pieces of the service. It doesn't want to know how hard it is. It doesn't want to know, the customer doesn't want to know how many servers it takes or how much network time it takes. They don't want to know anything. They don't want to know that stuff. They just want the service that is defined, and now we get into this conversation. Let's keep going. It fulfills one or more needs of the customer. So a service is basically developed around a need of the customer. There are indeed internal services within IT. There are services that customers never know about. There are lots of them, modular services that IT should work on, and I'll talk a little bit about those, and that just involves IT and maybe other members of IT. But when in this conversation, especially as it relates to a service catalog, these are the definitions of services. Fulfills one or more needs of the customer, supports the customer's business objectives, once again focused on the customer, is perceived by the customer as a coherent whole. So the customer sees the customer understands that what it is. So the customer understands what it is and sees it as a coherent whole under a single name. So the when we start talking about that, that means we don't have services like network. We don't have services like those kinds of things. What we have is something where we have the fact that we have things that basically say, I am accounts receivable, I'm accounts payable. Those are the kinds of things we need in terms of services about people and about the customer. So when we say services delivering value to customers, facilitating outcomes, what we're talking about now is that it's only the outcome the customer cares about, only the outcome that the customer wants to achieve. That's what we need. They don't want to know about all the specifics. Okay, so let's talk more about what customers want. They don't really want technology. They don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want the result, the outcome. They want a quarter-inch hole. Okay, so this becomes key to the conversation. They want an outcome. That's what they're after. So we talk about a service catalog. The service catalog becomes the primary place, in many cases, the only place. Well, let me step back for a minute. If you spent any time in IT at all, you understand that what we've got is so you understand that we have many channels for communication in the world of IT between IT and the business. And while that may sound good, because communication is always good, I'm saying in many cases it's very disorganized, and because we don't therefore control it. So what we're really looking for is a couple of channels, a way to focus the communication from the business in IT in certain ways. So from business to IT, the channel should be, one way that they talk to us is through the service desk. They have issues, they have questions, they have whatever. They come in through the service desk. They get great service, they get answers, they get issue fixed, they get all that stuff. It's all about communication. The other communication channel that we want to promote and that we want to be obvious is the service catalog. That's our storefront. That's our advertising for all of the services that we have in IT and that we're making available to the customer. So we need to clearly communicate to those stakeholders the value that IT can bring, what exactly it delivers, what is the issue, what is the service that we're trying to offer, and then how well it performs against expectations. So expectations are going to be created by basically internal preferences or prejudices, and also what we tell them it's going to be. We tell them that it's going to be this good, it's going to be this available, it's going to be this fast, it's going to be this responsive. So those are the expectations. Now, so what a service catalog, what a service does is it's supposed to meet those expectations. And we now make promises in some cases. We make promises that say, this will be this good, this fast, this responsive, this. What do we call those promises in the world of IT? We call them SLAs. We call them service level agreements. So we write down our promises, and those promises then become the SLA. We codify them into a service level agreement. And that's the expectations, because that is the expectation setting document. Now, the other piece of this is I go out into IT shops a lot, and I say, I'm a pretty simple guy, really, and I ask some questions. And one of the questions I ask is, so what's the definition of success in your IT shop? And I get a lot of silence, and people aren't quite sure what to say, and if I let the uncomfortable silence go on long enough, then somebody chimes in with 99.5% availability on the network, really good customer satisfaction surveys, no calls into the help desk, those kinds of things. The truth is, most people who actually work day-to-day in IT can't tell you what the definition of success is for IT. They can't tell you. And what I am saying is that when you switch to a service-focused environment, and when you start saying, we're going to provide services, and that's going to be the definition of IT, and when we provide those services, we're going to actually codify how well we're going to do that, we're going to call that an SLA, and we're going to make promises to people, and we're going to keep our promises, that just redefines success. Now success has been redefined. Now success is, I met or exceeded my service level agreement. Suddenly I now have a very specific definition of success. I know exactly whether I succeeded or whether I didn't. All of that makes total sense to people. That's what we need to work towards. So a service catalog is constitutive. It defines what IT does and does not do, and on what terms. So you need, and also what type of IT shop are you? So what we're talking about there is, are we really service focused? Are we an IT shop that's very into control and very into basically having a very small box of things we do? Or are we an IT shop that's more expansive and that's willing to kind of roll with the punches? How loosey-goosey are we? How tightly controlled are we? And what we discover, and the more conversations we have around this, is that we still need to basically focus on the processes within ITIL, make them mature, get them tight, because then we don't have to worry about that part. There's enough part that we have to worry about, often being the customer that can come up with almost anything you can imagine. They have these little surprises for us from time to time, and we can actually roll with those punches a lot better if we have everything else in order, if we have our house in order on all the other pieces. It's got to be actionable. The service catalog can no longer be a paper brochure or a book or a booklet. It has to be actionable. It has to be something people can do. They can find things, they can learn about the things they found, they can then take action. Meaning, for all intents and purposes, the service catalog, the ultimate service catalog, would be Amazon.com. So we need something along those lines, perhaps not quite that expansive, but the intuition where people don't have to do a lot of training to go to Amazon.com, search for something, find it, buy something. They don't have to train to do that. The same kind of thing needs to be incorporated into a service catalog in today's environment. Also, it's governing in that we explain all the key terms, conditions, any controls that are in there, meaning I can't give you that free phone that you've like until you get approval from this level or your boss or this. So there has to be some sort of governance in terms of inventory, in terms of spending money, in terms of processes. All of that has to be part of the game as we move forward with an actionable service catalog. Now, a service catalog can always have different views. And this is why an electronic service catalog is so cool compared to the piece of paper we used to have. So the business customer, this is the guy who says, well, wait a minute, I want to know from a business standpoint which services I'm using in my business unit, which IT services am I using? Am I buying them? What level am I getting from them? Have we got agreements in place? What's my IT spend? And we're starting to see in the statistics and the various studies and whatnot from all the key research firms that the majority of the IT spend is now being done by non-IT people. So the majority of spending on IT resources is being done by non-IT people. So in this case, we've got a business unit that's probably spending money buying services from their internal IT shop, but they're also probably spending money buying services from outside their IT shop. The end user, that's the simplest one, right? They just want to know what they can buy and what they can't. Now, because it's electronic, and just in the same way that I'm any other site that you go on to, I'm going to have to somehow log in. I'm going to have to authenticate, and therefore I'm going to have a profile. My profile is going to say what department I'm in and what level of approval I have. So what services can I actually buy so that I'll have to see, so that they'll be seen, so I can, and then what else might there be? Well, there could be services I can't buy, so we gray them out, but we still make them visible because maybe you want them, so you can go to somebody with a higher level and ask that they get those. Or we can have them just not show up at all. So we can have those services just, they don't exist because you're not at the right level to see them. All of that is part of the game. Once I know which services I can buy, I click on the service and I get a detailed explanation as to exactly why I would want it, what it is, what it does, and then when will I get it, right? What can I buy and when will I get it? Just like Amazon, I want that thing. What's their next thing? After you've paid for it, what's the next thing they say? How fast would you like to ship that baby? How fast do you want it in your actual pocket? What do you need right now? And then there's the other view, and this would be the IT view, the technical view. So now what services do we actually offer on the service catalog? What levels are available? Because all those conversations around service levels and service level agreements can be put in one place. One single place, we can explain all the different service levels, and we don't have to put all this stuff in different service level agreements. And then what are the key metrics as to how I measure the success of a given service, as to how I measure how it's performing, how I measure whether that service is meeting the customer's needs, etc. So let's get back to that middle bullet. What levels are available? Because this is the cool part. In other words, what we're really creating when we create a service catalog is we're creating a menu. And if you go to a restaurant and you order a standard dish off the menu, right? Let's just say their number, just for argument's sake. You order a standard 26, then the waiter or waitress just says 26. They just go back and boom, they order 26. We all know what 26 is. We all know what it means. Everybody knows. So if you order a standard service, and the way that most service catalogs should be constructed are such that 80% of the standard needs of everybody should be in the service catalog. So they should be able to find a standard product that works for them right in the service catalog 80% of the time. So therefore, there's no conversations really about service level agreements. It's I want number 28, and number 28 is such and such a service, and it's going to be this available, and it's going to be this. Here's how we're going to support it, and here's this, and here's this. So all of that becomes standard stuff. Makes it very slick, very easy, very quick. Now, the truth, of course, is, let's step back for a second. Is that easy? What I just said sounds easy to say it. I mean, I got a slide after all. I worked up a whole slide on it. No, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. What you discover is you don't know when you walk out of the box exactly what the customers want. It involves a lot of conversations back and forth, what levels they need to achieve, how it supports their business and the business value. All of that stuff has to be worked out, and that's therefore that's the complicated part after you've defined the service. So what is a service? How's it made up? Well, most services, and this is a generic look, but basically it works pretty well. So I've got this business service, which is the top end. This is the business providing business stuff to customers, whatever business processes they need in order to run the business. Okay, now underneath that, there's probably going to be an IT service. All right, that IT service is going to then have all sorts of little pieces that go around that. There's going to be policies that hopefully come from the business themselves. Strategies, some governance as to how good the service needs to be, that kind of things. Compliance needs through external bodies are coming in and doing audits and things like that. And the services are necessary to actually fulfill those compliance requirements. And then we move down a level and we start to see SLAs and we start to get real geeky. So how does that actually work? That works like this. So now what we're starting to talk about here is we've got the service, which is really at the utility level. We've got some sort of warranty, which basically says here's how good it's going to be. Here's what IT is going to provide, and also including price. Then we get down into what I would call the kind of geeky level, the assets and which resources, which systems are involved in doing this, which particular systems, which servers, which data, which applications. All of that stuff comes into play. Then the various capabilities, maybe external capabilities, OLAs within IT, third-party suppliers outside of IT, all of that feeding into the IT processes, which may or may not feed into a specific service, which underpin business processes. So now, what do I expect the business to see? Over on the side, you see that little pink business view. Only those two layers does the business care the slightest bit about. They don't care any bit about that. Any bit about any of the other stuff. It's back to they don't care about the costs and risks. They just want the outcomes. Now, we can bundle services as well. All services could be bundled. This is an old Dell screen from the Dell websites, years old. But the point is that you're very familiar with this on your everyday life because you probably have cable or you have satellites, right? So I just want HBO. You call the cable company and say, I'd like to just buy HBO. And they say, yes, we'll be happy to provide you with the HBO bundle. 9 channels. It's HBO this and HBO Funny and HBO Comedy and HBO Signature, HBO 2, HBO Spanish, HBO. I mean, no, I just want HBO. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't have that. You have to buy the bundle. So you have to buy the bundle. So they're offering, if you think of channels when you turn on your TV and your 500 channels that you now have available to you as services, how many of them are available as individual services? Almost none. There's your standard package, which gives you 120 channels, and then there's your upgrade package, it gives you another 60. They're all available as bundles. So individual services, not necessarily. Now, we haven't even gotten to the point where, because everything we've talked about so far has been standard. We haven't talked about the fact that some services might be custom, and we also need to talk about the fact that if there is such a thing as a custom service and you're offering it, then we need to talk about the concept of exactly who's going to pay for that. Because a custom service is definitely going to involve additional expense on both the IT side, and it needs to involve additional expense on the business side as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. The service catalog, when we talk about what can be achieved in the service catalog. So let's get to, so it identifies all the services offered. Now the title of this talk is Service Catalog Lite, and how much service catalog is enough? And the answer is, I don't know. It all depends on your operation. So what does that really mean? It means that I've seen a number of organizations tell me they have a service catalog. And I've gone in and I've talked to the organization, I've gotten more details. And what they've done is they've created what I call Service Catalog Lite. They've created a light version of a full service catalog. And I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. And what does it mean? Well, they've taken what I often called, or the old days called, a request portal, and they've moved that into the service catalog technology, the service catalog module within an application, those kinds of things. And they're using it as to solve very time-consuming requests that they can now take off the back of the service desk primarily. So these are things which I would normally call the service desk. I would get a human being, they would agree that they're going to now go and do this and do this and do this and do this for me. But instead, I've been able to automate that through a Service Catalog Lite. And when I do that, I can take that workload off the service desk, freeing the service desk to do what we hope they're better at, and that they're more attuned to, which is do break fix. Also to maybe even start after the break fix stuff gets fixed. Maybe they start doing more proactive consultative stuff, which actually leads to higher productivity from the business. That's what we really want out of the service desk. We want them to be providing total services, communication, almost consultative, and I've been saying this for a frighteningly long time, almost 20 years. So now we get into the default levels of service that I talked about should be part of the service catalog. So whenever you've got a service catalog lite, you're taking what I would call standard changes, standard requests, things by volume, things that people do the most. I need a new, maybe we have a company phone policy. I need a new phone. I dropped my phone in the toilet. I dropped my phone in my beer. Whatever, my phone is dead and I need a new phone. That's definitely one that can be on the service catalog lite or the request portal. I need a toner cartridge. I need a mouse. I need a keyboard. These are, not high buck deals, really predictable, easy things that people request. Personally, I think toner cartridges and probably mice and keyboards should all be in the office supply cabinet and shouldn't involve a human being at all, other than just going and picking them up. But those are the kinds of things, very standard stuff. A new phone. I need to move. I need to move my all my stuff from A to B. So it's really a facilities request, but it's really part of the service catalog. I need an ad. I need a new printer. I've got a new fancy laptop, but it doesn't have a CD drive, and I need a CD drive that runs on a USB port. I need this. Standard stuff that is pretty easy to resolve and pretty easy to get, and we can offer as a very standard way of doing things. And those then can be automated completely. It doesn't involve any human beings. If there's a certain amount of money, I need a new laptop. Maybe that needs higher levels of approval. So that approval mechanism should also be automated. That can actually be a workflow that's kicked off by the service catalog, comes back around, okay, it's done, and it actually moves into an order queue and then maybe a staging queue when it arrives in our shop. So the service catalog, as I was saying before, becomes the master SLA. It becomes the place where all of those parameters for the default levels of service for all the services that we've decided to offer is there. So it's a master SLA. If you want normal stuff, it's all in the service catalog. I don't need to cut a custom SLA. I don't need to write SLAs for everything. If you buy the standard stuff, I don't need an SLA. It's perfect. It's right there. Everyone can see it. The other piece of this, and this is actually good and bad, is that we're going to steer the customers to this service catalog. This is where we're going to send them. We're going to tell them this is where you want to go. Don't go anywhere else. Don't ask anybody else. The accurate information, the up-to-date information, the all-encompassing information is in the service catalog. It's up to the minute. It's the place you need to go. So that's a good thing. And it's a bad thing because we have just created a level of accountability that says, I got to keep this thing up to date. This thing has to be right. I have to cross-check it for quality assurance. I have to make sure this thing is right, and it has to be right every day, all the time. So that's a big deal. And that requires a lot of work on our part, which is fine because we're saving that time other places, much more than that time actually. So it's a lot easier to update one place than to update 50 different SLAs. The service catalog is accessible by the customer, is written in customer language, is focused on the customer's needs. Everything about this document is customer based. And if it's not, or if you need a technical service catalog, then that's fine, but don't make it the same catalog as the customer service catalog. Or you could have it all in one, but remember that conversation we had earlier about I have to log on and authenticate myself. And when I authenticate myself, I'm a normal customer, so I see only normal customer things. If I log on and I'm actually an IT geek, then I could see a whole different catalog, and that would be just fine as long as that's the way you want to play the game. From the customer side, it definitely needs to be non-technical, and it definitely needs to include a glossary of terms just in case we accidentally put an acronym in that we don't explain, which happens, of course, all the time. So that becomes important in this conversation. So service catalog lite, more like a standard change, standard request for information, request for supplies, request for a new device, a new phone, a new CD DVD drive, a new laptop, a request for a move, an install, an add, a change. All of those things become part of Service Catalog Lite. And these are low-risk items. They're easily quantifiable. It should be automated. We should be able to come up with a process. Let's talk about this whole automated concept for a minute. Everybody says, oh, let's automate that, let's automate that. So, yes, it's a great idea, great idea. But guess what happens? You can't automate a process that isn't absolutely rock solid. And that's what we're really saying here. We're saying that we need a rock solid process for getting these things to happen. And it really doesn't have a lot of variables in it. And the problem that what I see people do right now is they start automating, and they draw this process flow out on a sheet of paper or a screen. And the process flow looks something like, well, it goes here, and then it goes here, and then it goes over there, and then it goes into a box where it says magic happens. And then it leaves that box in one of two channels and goes here and then goes there, etc. So what was in the box where magic happened? A person, a human being that had to make a judgment, that had to make a call, goes one way or goes another, or there had to be approvals, or it goes some, those kinds of things become part of that process. And that's not an automated process. It really isn't. Now, I understand there has to be approvals above a certain dollar amount. I appreciate all that. And but those approvals, for the most part, can be automated in such a way where it just comes by email to the person, the approver. They just click on something and send reply, and that's done. It's approved. So those kinds of things it may not be 100% automated, but it doesn't involve lots of choices. Those are the kind of issues where you run into problems when you have a lot of different choices or a lot of options, models that people can get. All those things become problematic in terms of trying to automate it. And if it's not automated, then you lose a lot of the advantage of the Service Catalog Lite. I don't expect somebody to automate a request for a new accounts payable service. That's not what we're talking about here. I expect to be able to automate something little, all the little things that take our time day in and day out in IT. And that's what we should be able to do. Conversely, on the customer side, they're thrilled. They can't believe it. This is fantastic. You go to this website, you click a couple of things, I get a new phone. Oh my God, where have you been all my life, IT? I love you, I love you. And in one case, this is a very funny case, but this person was one of the 4 CIOs in an extremely large insurance company, one of the ones you see on TV every night. In one of those extremely large insurance companies, this one of 4 CIOs literally dropped her phone in the toilet and came in the next day and signed on to their request portal, their Service Catalog Lite, ordered a new phone, got it in 2 days, and from that moment on was a huge proponent of ITIL. As far as she was concerned, the Service Catalog was ITIL. And the ITIL people got nothing but support from her after that. So in other words, you really have to think of this as not just helpful from the IT standpoint, but it's incredibly well thought of on the customer side. They're thrilled to have this stuff. They're thrilled to be able to do things very simply, easily, especially because every human being working for these companies now has shopped online. They've shopped online with their own credit card, and they know that what they can do with their own credit card, and they know what they can do at home, and they certainly have now grown to expect that conversation and that level of consumerization in the IT world. One quote that I heard at one point was, the young people, when they come, these 20s and 30-year-olds like Andrew Moses, who introduced me, who's sitting right across from me, which is very rare. We're actually in the same room. These kids, I call them because I'm old, they come into the office place of today, the business of today, and it's like, as far as they're concerned, it's the computer museum. These are the computers we used to have. Look, there's like a museum. Look, there's a green screen. Look, there's actual characters on a dark screen. I think it's called DOS. It's kind of ridiculous stuff that these kids, I mean, anyway, but I digress. Sorry. So they expect the average consumer, the average employee today, the average knowledge worker of today expects to have the same level of consumerization that they do at home. There's no reason, they see no reason why it would be any other way, and I don't disagree with them. I think they're right. It shouldn't be any other way. So the Service Catalog Lite is a phenomenal way to get going in the world of Service Catalog and the world of services in general. It also is it's a quick win from the customer's eyes. It's not really rocket science to get it going, so it's not too hard to get it going. The hardest thing of this whole little deal we just talked about is defining the service. That's the hardest part, because people don't do that very well. Now, if we keep it simple, like I think in the Service Catalog Lite, we are encouraged to do that. Keep it straightforward and keep it simple. These are not as hard to define. I need a new phone to replace an existing phone. I need a new phone because I'm a new employee, right? Those are pretty straightforward services. I need a new printer. I need a personal printer. I can't print to the office printer because I deal with sensitive documents. I need a personal one. I'm now going to move over to another office, so I need my machine and my laptop and my printer and my phone. I need all that moved so that when somebody calls my extension, it rings over there and not here. That's all part of a more complicated service. Now, the other piece of that is, and I mentioned very early on, that there are services that the customer never sees. And I feel strongly about that, because one of the services, and it should be part of Service Catalog Lite, that I find that's underserved in most organizations is onboarding. Now, the onboarding service is something where we can predict what a new employee needs. We know it. Well, we may have to ask, we may have to do a little research to figure it out, we may have to talk to HR, and we certainly have to talk to facilities, and then we have to talk to IT. So we have different elements in this, but basically we know what a new employee needs to become fully functional. We know that they need somewhere to sit, they need a PC, whether it be a laptop or a desktop, they need a phone, they need an extension, that phone needs to be hot, their PC needs to be on the network, they need a log on to the corporate system, a log on to the corporate network, they need an email account, blah, 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 blah. And I go on and on and on. We probably have 20 different, what I call modular building block services in the overall onboarding service, which is the one that we offer to the public, to the business. We offer onboarding to different departments or business units. So now but all of those services that I just rattled off, those are all little building block modular services, which are part of the onboarding service, but actually aren't visible and can't really be offered or purchased separately. Right? Because it doesn't make sense. So onboarding service is something which, once again, huge quick win. I've been to places where it took 6 to 8 weeks for a new employee to become fully functional, which is, I mean, that's crazy. It's ridiculous. It involves a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of processes that are antiquated and all that stuff. But I've seen IT organizations who are responsive take that 6 weeks down to 3 days. I can get this guy, this woman, this man up in 3 days, fully functional, ready to go. And this is a huge productivity gain, because here's the other problem, which is almost funny. Who owned the onboarding service before we started offering it as a service? Like right now in your organization, if you don't have an onboarding service that's owned by somebody, then who owns it? My research says the new employee owns it, where it's really just a final step of the interview. Yes, you're hired. Now we'll see how well you do navigating the corporate maze to see whether you can get yourself a computer or anything that works. So it makes total sense for IT to take that over and to offer it as part of our Service Catalog Lite, and to offer it as a service that we own and that we then interface with facilities, interface with HR. Makes total sense, complete sense indeed. All right, well, I think I've gone on long enough, so time for a few questions. All right, Andrew, do we have any questions?
Just one so far. I think it's probably something that I might have to answer. Looks like they asked me like, how does Freshservice handle the service catalog lite portion?
Okay.
Do you want me to
Well,
share my screen?
I certainly can't answer that one, Andrew. All right,
Sure.
so you go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, it's no longer me.
All right, perfect. Thanks, George. Was great. Great webinar. I'm just gonna quickly take a minute to show you what I have in here. Like with Freshservice, I'll just show you how we have made that automated in the sense that to make it more accountable, like you mentioned, right? I mean, I'll show you how you could create an actionable service catalog. All right. So let's look at the end users portal for a minute. So this is something that we have kind of put together. George, if you don't mind minimizing it,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
that's fine.
getting in Andrew's way. All right.
Perfect. So here, you see that there are incidents that they could report. Obviously, there are service requests too. So this is where you say keep it easy for them to pick something from the list, right? So for example, if I need a MacBook or an Apple Mac, all that I have to do with Fresh Service here is that just select it and place the request. So that's the minimal work required from the end user. All that they has to know tell me is do they need an 8 GB or a 16 GB. They select it, they place the request. Right now, it becomes the IT's job to service that particular end user. So what we do is to make it more actionable and accountable. You have rules that you can set up. So based on like George mentioned, you don't want to do the paper pen work anymore. You want somebody to approve it right before it's been the service can be fulfilled. So what you could do here is set up a small automation. Call it whenever a service is requested. Say in this case Apple. I want you to set the priority as high, send it for an approval to the head of the department, and assign it to my team that fulfills that particular service request. So from my side, all that I've done is the end user goes, clicks on the button, it automatically generates that particular ticket. And then, I mean, the service request in this case, it'll automatically be sent to a person who's going to be approving that particular service request. Once it's approved, it's pretty simple. I mean, even for the approver, like George mentioned, just give them a link. Just ask them to approve. Don't take a paper pen. Ask them to sign off something, right? I mean, it's just a link. I can go in here, say approved, so that the end user knows that his request has been approved, and we can fulfill that service request without going through a lot of hoops and bounds, right? So that answers that question. Apart from that, if anybody has any other question, we could still look at it.
So is there, so we assume that there'll be a single approver, and I think for most items of this nature, whether it's even a normal, whether it's normal or not, we assume that it'll be a single approver, which I think makes the most sense in terms of this.
Perfect. Thanks. One more question here for you, George, is that please compare and contrast the request portal and a service catalog.
Well, I think the request portal, it's a good question, and and the request portal, and this is my definition. It's not like there's some official ITIL definition here, but this is my definition. And so the answer is the request portal is for things that are what I call standard. They are standard things. They are quantifiable. They're relatively small meaning a few $100s, maybe up to the cost of a Mac, that they are very predictable. The number of parameters is very small, or options is relatively small, and they can be delivered hopefully in an automated way, so that actually so human beings don't really have to mess with it. That's the ideal scenario anyway. So predictable, low risk, kind of low buck. I mean, you can obviously, we can sit around and argue what your approval threshold might be, but able to be delivered in a very predictable time frame, a few days, maybe a day, maybe 3 days, maybe a couple of weeks, depending on what it is. as opposed to a full service catalog, what I define as a full service catalog, which is where we now have services that are well beyond standard requests, that are services where we actually are running the business, which is accounts payable, accounts receivable, invoicing, if you're an insurance company, claims processing, those kinds of large-scale services that are provided by IT. If they've had the brains to switch those things which are usually apps and actually move them into the concept of services. And then maybe if there's chargeback involved, that when you do have chargeback for the full services or large-scale services, you have to do it in a billing unit that makes sense to the consumer. So if finance is consuming accounts payable, what are they going to want to pay, or how are they going to want to figure it out, what they're paying? Well, accounts payable tends to process invoices and writes checks. So what would be an obvious thing? Well, you bill for the accounts payable service by check. Now, truthfully, there are most IT shops out there who, when I say that, they go, I have no idea what it costs to write a check. Right, I understand that. You know how much the server was, how much the accounts payable app is, you know how much the prorated network stuff. You can figure those things out. But in terms of how many checks they actually write, and would that actually make sense? I think those are the conversations when we move to a larger kind of full service catalog. Those are conversations we need to have with the business. So we need some money back for this. We can't just give this to you for free because we're not a charity here in IT. So what would make sense to you? Think about your own life. I mean, does your cable company bill you by how many wires they have to run? Or do they bill you, what do they bill you for? They bill you for how many channels you buy, not for how many channels you watch, how many channels you buy. That's the way their cable company does it. Think of your cell phone. You have, base fees, and then you have over the top. These are services that you and I use every day. Think of travel, right? Services. And the concept of services I find fascinating. When I get into a discussion of what is a service, I try and take it out of IT. So a couple of services that I find instructive are, there's one company, it's actually in Iowa, and the company offers, they provide tires for truck fleets. That's what they provide. So, well, okay, George, so what do? They sell tires? Nope, they don't sell tires. They rent tires. They kind of rent them, but what do they charge? Because so that the customer understands, they charge by the mile. Because truck fleets know all about how many miles they go. They know exactly how many miles the truck goes. They know exactly that, and therefore, if they have a little charge of 3 cents or something like that a mile to add on for all the tires, boom, they know exactly what to do. They know how to bill it. They know how to keep track of it. Makes total sense to them. And the company is thrilled, and so are the other people. And if a tire ever goes flat, well, that's just included. I mean, they just come out and fix it, and that's because they want you to roll because they need more miles. Okay, one more, and then I'll turn this back over to Andrew. I fly a lot, and I fly on jet planes usually, hopefully, and I found out that the airlines don't own the engines. They don't own the engines. The engines are made by 3 companies: Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, and General Electric. That's it. Okay, so they used to, at one point, they started leasing the engines, and then the company said, no, I got a better idea. How about if you just pay us by the hour? So everybody knows, everybody who flies airplanes understands that the number of hours that the plane is up makes total sense to everybody. It makes sense to the staff of the airline, makes sense to the mechanics, makes sense to everything. It's how one rates an airline or an airplane, whether it's been used, and all that stuff. So they pay for these engines by the hour. They pay for thrust. The service is thrust. That's what they pay for. So when we start thinking about services and we get this in our head, we got to think bigger. We got to expand our horizons, right? It's beyond what we normally think when we're talking about this. Back to you, Andrew.
Great. Thanks, George. There is another question. What is the best way to define the services? Internal to IT based on service desk calls, user groups with customers, or administration?
Good question. Not an easy one to answer. So let's say you have all these service desk calls. So we can, we can obviously, the service desk calls that are incidents, in other words, something's wrong, that's probably not a service request. So let's rule those out. So then we get into service requests to the help desk. Those are things that might be things that we could consider for a service catalog lite. And the other piece of this is that I think that we need to have conversations with the customer about what it is they actually expect from IT, and then, lo and behold, what we could give them that they don't expect. What could we actually help them with? How could we enable things? How can we increase our value to them? And that's going to involve a conversation with the customer. And it may not be the service level people, service level manager, who's more concerned with what levels, what services do we offer, what levels of services do we offer, and are we actually meeting the levels we promise? That's what a service level manager does. So in ITIL, there's a new process called business relationship management, and it makes a lot of sense. It's basically a liaison between IT and the business, someone who speaks business language, someone who speaks IT language, someone who knows what the standard offerings are in the service catalog, and therefore knows what they can promise, and someone who knows what's not in the service catalog, and therefore knows what they cannot promise. But the purpose of the business relationship management is, what's the business doing now that we can help with, and what's the business going to do in 3, 6, 12 months that we could help with and we could offer them, as opposed to the surprises. We have a lot of surprises in IT, and the business has grown kind of tired of talking to IT. So they, in some cases, they don't talk to us, and they just go about their business and do things, and suddenly it pops up, and suddenly they actually own a device that might not be what we consider an IT device. I just heard of another one today where a hospital bought x-ray machines that had to be on the network. Well, but they never talked to IT. They suddenly bought the x-ray machines. They bought the x-ray machines. The x-ray machines were there. They were ready to hook them up. They were ready to go, and then suddenly can't find the Wi-Fi. And so then they call IT. That's the first call. When I have the x-ray machine, I'm ready to do an x-ray. Or I hope they weren't doing it that, but I'm ready to start using it and start setting it up, and I can't get it connected to the network, so you have to come down and make that happen. Surprise! So those are the kinds of things that we hopefully can do away with when we talk to the business on a regular basis. That's the key, not some sort of project basis, but on a regular basis we have meetings and talk about stuff. Back to Andrew.
Thanks, George. One other question. I think we have another 8 minutes. Can we take one more? Perfect. What standardization has or is occurring with service catalog designs and implementation? Standardizations has
standardization. Okay, yeah. So that's a good question. So what happens sometimes is that, so the question is about standardization of service catalogs. So sometimes it's not impossible for service catalogs to show up that have certain services almost built in. Because everybody needs a new computer, everybody needs a new phone, everybody needs that type of stuff. So those are the kinds of standardization that we're starting to see out there. The other thing is there's an awful lot of organizations today whose service catalogs are actually websites, and those websites are actually publicly available. You can't buy anything, but you can actually see how they're organized, and that's kind of interesting. So if you just Google, service catalogs, there's a number, especially universities are kind of famous for them making theirs available. You can see how they're organized and how they're set up. And so there's normal, what I would consider consumer services, and then there's more technical services, and there's custom services, and then there's professional services where they're basically buying a geek for time and materials. There's an hourly rate for a geek or a programmer to come write a website or do this or do this or do that. It's all offered right on the service catalog. So there's really quite a spectrum of what people have, from the small request portal type stuff all the way to just literally anything that IT offers. Because the real goal from an IT standpoint is to allow the service catalog to function as the only place you need to go in order to see what IT offers. And that involves IT flipping itself to only offer services, not technology. I'm going to give one final example since we have a couple minutes. So here's an example of an internal service within IT that they didn't even know they were offering. Okay, so here you are, you've got a central IT shop. You also have business units. The business unit has embedded IT within it, so it's not part of the central IT. The business embedded IT, the business unit embedded IT, it actually has a lot of programmers, and they're getting involved in a business solution, writing a new app. So when they're writing this new app, they go out, they write the app. The business says, okay, I think we're ready. Okay. The business part of the IT embedded IT group called Central IT, and sends down a 4-page spec sheet on the server that they want this stuff to run on, and they want you to drop that on the backbone. Central IT, being dutiful and responsive, gets them the server, the exact server they spec'd, and the exact everything they spec'd, puts it on there, sends them the root password. We're done. Okay. 2 weeks later, they load the app up. It turns out the app is too slow. The business is kind of complaining, of course, to their individual embedded IT group. And the embedded IT group immediately, of course, blames the central IT group for having a lousy network and a slow network and everything else. And in truth, what's happened is this. We didn't understand that Central IT was offering a service. Central IT should have refused to give them the box. Because what Central IT in that case is doing is they're offering an application hosting service. And that application hosting service would involve, if we knew we were doing that, if we knew we were involved in application hosting, we would then turn around and say, hey, if somebody said, hey, I want you to host my app, well, we have like 20 questions. We have like, well, what do you mean? What app? How fast is it? How big is it? How many simultaneous users are there going to be? How many people are going to be hitting this at one time? What kind of data needs are you going to have with each transaction? How long do you want to save this stuff? How secure does this need to be? How fast and responsive does it? Because we're going to start that whole litany of questions to do our analysis to find out. Because what really is happening is the business unit is asking for a service. They're asking for fast. And I'd like some fast, please. And we need to be in the business of offering fast. We just have to ask a bunch of questions first. We have one more. Okay.
Yes. Do you have to have all your services fully defined, including workflows, before you can set up a service catalog lite?
No. That's it. No, you don't. You can set them up, but what you have to do is think of this as a marketing concept. So what are you going to roll out? Because that's really the conversation. You're going to have a service catalog. You're going to get it up to a certain point, and then you're going to roll it out. You're going to make it public. You're going to tell everybody about it. Okay, then you can make it more full-featured, things like that as time goes on. But if it's a bust when you roll it out, if it doesn't give them enough value, then they won't come back. So you really it can't be too minimal. It's got to provide value. So think about it as a rollout. What are you going to give them during the rollout? And then you just version it. Here's Service Catalog Lite version 2. Here's Service Catalog Lite version 3, which offers more services, right? And more free time for you, more free time for them. All that's great. But think of it in terms of a rollout and a marketing opportunity for you to them.
All right, so that's all with the questions. Thank you everybody for spending an hour with us. Hope it was informative, and thanks for all the great conversation, good questions. And thank you, George, for as always, giving us a lot of information.
Thank you, Andrew. Loved it.
All right, thanks. Thank you so much. And as I mentioned earlier, we will upload this webinar in our website. Thank you. Bye.